You ever had a moment when your heart just stopped and you knew deep down something was terribly wrong? After a year of silence, my daughter finally invited me to dinner. But when I arrived at her house, her maid grabbed my arm and whispered, "Don't go in. Leave now." My heart stopped. What was happening inside? I ran to my car and watched from a distance, completely unaware that the next 10 minutes would change everything I thought I knew about my family. If you think you know how this ends, trust me, you don't. Stay with me. Because what happened next is something no mother should ever have to face. Asterisk, it had been a year since my daughter, Sloane, and I had spoken. A whole year. You'd think time would dull the sting, but every day without her felt like a fresh paper cut small, but sharp enough to remind me of what I'd lost. I'd spent 365 days replaying our last argument in my head, wondering if I should have just let her win that silly debate about the best way to cook Thanksgiving turkey. For the record, it's not deep fried. No matter what those trendy food blogs say, I always thought I was a good Mother Nadine Foster. The woman who never missed a school play, who made the best lemon bars on the block, who could fix a broken heart with a hug and a cup of cocoa. But with Sloane, things had gotten complicated. Maybe it's what happens when your only child grows up and starts seeing the world through her own eyes. Or maybe it's just that we're both a little too stubborn for our own good. The silence between us started as a cold shoulder, then stretched into missed birthdays, and finally, a year of nothing but awkward silence. I'd tried to reach out, sent her a funny meme here, a thinking of you text there, but she never responded. I told myself she was busy, that she'd come around, but deep down, I worried. I worried that I'd lost her for good, that our last words would be about turkey, of all things. I'd see mothers and daughters laughing together at the farmer's market and feel a pang of jealousy. Sharp, it almost made me dizzy. I missed her. I missed her laugh, her sarcasm, even the way she'd roll her eyes at my mom jokes. I missed being her mom. So when I got her text dinner at my place, 7 p.m., just us, my heart did a little somersault. I stared at the screen, half convinced I was dreaming. I read it once, twice, 3 times, just to be sure. There it was, plain as day. No emojis, no exclamation points, just a simple invitation. I sat down at the kitchen table, phone in hand, and tried to make sense of it. Was this a peace offering? Or a setup for another round of Mom, you never listen? Was she ready to forgive me? Or was she just looking for closure? I had no idea, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to miss this chance. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a flurry of nerves and excitement. I must have changed my outfit 5 times, each one more casually elegant than the last. I settled on my favorite green blouse, the one Sloane had once said made me look artsy, and a pair of slacks that didn't pinch at the waist. I even put on a little lipstick, just in case. I wanted to look like the mom she remembered, not the one who'd spent the last year stress-eating ice cream and watching reruns of Murder, she wrote. Next came the wine. I stood in the grocery store aisle, staring at rows and rows of bottles, feeling completely out of my depth. Should I get red or white? Something fancy or just the usual? I finally settled on a nice bottle of Zinfandel Safe, but not too boring. I figured if things got awkward, at least we'd have something to sip on. I also picked up a bouquet of sunflowers, remembering how Sloane used to love them as a little girl. I wasn't sure if she still did, but it felt like a nice gesture. Maybe a peace offering of my own. The drive to her house felt longer than usual, even though it was only 20 minutes away. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I rehearsed my apology speech over and over in my head, trying to find the right words. I'm sorry for being stubborn. I miss you. Can we start over? Each version sounded clumsy and inadequate, but I hoped she'd hear the love behind the words. I wondered if she'd changed in the past year. Had she cut her hair? Was she still working at the same job? Was she happy? I realized how much I didn't know about her life anymore, and the thought made my chest ache. As I pulled up to her house, I took a deep breath and tried to steady my nerves. The porch light was on, casting a warm glow over the front steps. I could see shadows moving inside her silhouette, maybe, or just my imagination running wild. I sat in the car for a moment, gathering my courage. I thought about turning back, about texting her that I wasn't feeling well, but I knew I couldn't. Not this time. I owed it to both of us to try. I grabbed the wine and the flowers, checked my reflection in the rearview mirror one last time, stepped out into the cool evening air. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure the neighbors could hear it. I walked up the steps, each one feeling heavier than the last. I paused at the door, took another deep breath, and raised my hand to knock. In that moment, I realized how much I wanted this. Not just the dinner, but the chance to reconnect, to heal, to be a family again. I didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. And sometimes, hope is all you need to take the first step. Asterisk. I pulled up to Sloane's house, my nerves jangling like wind chimes in a hurricane. It's the kind of anxious energy that makes your hands tremble and your mind race with every possible scenario. The porch light was on, casting a soft golden glow over the front steps. And I could see shadows moving in side flickers of life that made my heart leap with both hope and dread. I sat in the car for a moment, gathering myself, smoothing my hair in the rearview mirror, and whispering a silent prayer that tonight would be the night we finally bridged the gap between us. I grabbed the bottle of Zinfandel and the sunflowers, took a deep breath, and walked up the steps, each one echoing with memories of happier times, birthday parties, sleepovers, and the endless parade of Halloween costumes Sloane had insisted on showing off before trick-or-treating. I was halfway up the steps when the door opened just a crack and Maribel, Sloane's maid, peeked out. I'd always liked Maribel. She was the kind of woman who remembered your favorite cookie and always had a kind word. But tonight, she looked pale, her eyes wide and frantic like she'd seen a ghost. Before I could even say hello, she reached out, grabbed my arm with surprising strength, and whispered, "Don't go in. Leave immediately." Her voice was barely audible, but the urgency in her tone sent a chill straight down my spine. For a split second, I thought she must be joking. Maybe Sloane had planned some elaborate surprise. Or maybe Maribel was just being dramatic. But then I saw the way her hands shook, the way her eyes darted nervously over her shoulder, and I knew this was no joke. My mind raced through a dozen possibilities in the space of a heartbeat. Was there a gas leak? Had something caught fire? Was there a wild animal loose in the house? Or, heaven forbid, was Sloane's new boyfriend, the kind of man who thought business casual meant sweatpants and a bad attitude? I tried to laugh it off, but my knees went weak and I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I wanted to ask questions, to demand answers, but Maribel just shook her head, her grip tightening as if she could physically keep me from stepping inside. "Please, just go," she whispered again, her voice trembling. "It's not safe." Froze, torn between the urge to protect my daughter and the primal fear that told me to run. For a moment, I considered marching right in, demanding to know what was going on. But something in Maribel's eyes, something raw and desperate, made me pause. I've always prided myself on being brave, on facing life's challenges head on. But in that moment, all I could think about was the possibility that something truly terrible was happening inside that house. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear myself think. I glanced at the windows, searching for any sign of Sloane. But all I saw were shifting shadows and the faint flicker of candlelight. My mind conjured up every worst-case scenario: burglars, kidnappers, even a gas explosion. And I realized that whatever was happening, I was in no position to help. With my heart in my throat, I turned and hurried back down the steps, my legs moving faster than I thought possible. I clutched the wine and flowers to my chest like a shield, fumbling with my keys as I reached the car. I slid into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and sat there, breathless, watching the house from a distance. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the wine, and I could feel my pulse racing in my ears. I tried to calm myself, to think rationally, but all I could do was stare at the front door, half expecting it to burst open at any moment. I glanced at my phone, debating whether to call Sloane, the police, or just drive away and pretend none of this had happened. But I couldn't leave, not when my daughter was inside, not when Maribel's warning echoed in my mind like a siren. I watched as the minutes ticked by, each one stretching out longer than the last. The house seemed eerily quiet, the only movement the gentle sway of the porch swing in the evening breeze. I strained to see through the windows, searching for any sign of Sloane. But the shadows inside seemed to shift and dance, hiding whatever secrets the house held. My mind raced with questions. Was Sloane in danger? Was Maribel overreacting? Was I being foolish for sitting here, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty? I tried to steady my breathing, reminding myself that I was a mother. That I'd faced worse than this before, but the truth was, I'd never felt so helpless. I thought about all the times I'd comforted Sloane after a nightmare. All the times I'd promised her that nothing bad would ever happen as long as I was there. Now, I was the one who needed comforting, the one who needed someone to tell me it would all be okay. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, and forced myself to stay put to wait and watch. Even as every instinct screamed at me to do something, anything to protect my daughter. 10 minutes passed, though it felt like an eternity. And still I waited, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the house, praying that whatever danger lurked inside would pass us by. And as I sat there, caught between fear and hope, I realized that sometimes the hardest thing a mother can do is nothing at all. Asterisk. 10 minutes can feel like a lifetime when you're sitting in your car, clutching a bottle of Zinfandel and a wilting bouquet of sunflowers, watching your daughter's house as if you're in the middle of a suspense movie. I kept glancing at the front door, half expecting Sloane to come out and wave. Or maybe for Maribel to reappear and give me some kind of sign that it was safe. But the house stayed eerily still. The only movement, the gentle flicker of the porch light and the occasional shadow passing behind the curtains. My mind was a whirlwind of worry. Was Sloane in danger? Was I overreacting? Should I call someone? Or would that just make things worse? I was so lost in my thoughts that I nearly jumped out of my skin when suddenly the night was split by the sharp flash of red and blue lights. 2 police cars pulled up right in front of Sloane's house, their sirens mercifully silent, but their presence unmistakable. My heart leaped into my throat. I watched frozen as uniformed officers stepped out. Hands resting on their belts, eyes scanning the property with the kind of seriousness that made my stomach twist. I felt like I was watching an episode of Dateline unfold in real time, except this time I was the nervous mother in the car, not the viewer at home with a bowl of popcorn. Note to self, always wear mascara just in case you end up on the evening news. You never know when your close-up is coming. The officers moved quickly, one heading around the side of the house, the other knocking firmly on the front door. I could see Maribel open the door wider now, her face still pale but determined. And she spoke to the officer in rapid, hushed tones. I strained to hear, but the windows were up and my heart was pounding too loudly in my ears. I gripped my phone, debating whether to call Sloane, but before I could decide, it buzzed in my hand, making me jump again. It was Sloane. Relief and fear crashed over me in equal measure as I answered, my voice trembling. "Mom, are you okay?" "Where are you?" she asked, her voice thick with worry. I told her I was outside in my car, and before I could say another word, the front door flew open and Sloane came running out, her face streaked with tears, her hair wild around her shoulders. She looked both terrified and relieved, and in that moment, all the tension of the past year melted away. She rushed to my car, flung open the door, and threw her arms around me, sobbing into my shoulder. I held her tight, my own tears finally spilling over, the bottle of wine forgotten on the passenger seat. Between hiccuped breaths, Sloane explained what had happened. Maribel, ever the vigilant guardian, had been tidying up in the kitchen when she heard voices outside the back window. At first, she thought it was just the neighbors. But then she realized the voices were unfamiliar to men, speaking in low, urgent tones, discussing how to get inside without being seen. Maribel's heart had nearly stopped, but she'd kept her wits about her. She quietly called the police, then rushed to the front door just in time to see me walking up the steps. That's when she'd stopped me, her warning saving me from walking right into the middle of a potential break-in. The police, thanks to Maribel's quick thinking, had arrived before the men could make their move. As Sloane spoke, I watched the officers escort two scruffy-looking men from the backyard, their hands cuffed behind their backs. The men looked angry and defeated, and I shuddered to think what might have happened if Maribel hadn't acted so quickly. Or if I'd ignored her warning and gone inside. Sloane clung to me, her tears soaking my blouse, and I realized just how close we'd come to disaster. The fear that had gripped me in the car was nothing compared to the relief I felt now, knowing we were both safe. The officers took our statements, praising Maribel for her bravery and quick thinking. Sloane and I stood together on the front lawn, arms wrapped around each other, watching as the police cars drove away, their lights fading into the night. For a long moment, we just stood there, breathing in the cool night air, letting the adrenaline slowly ebb away. Sloane looked at me, her eyes red but shining, and whispered, "I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have called you sooner. I missed you so much." I hugged her tighter, my own apology caught in my throat. All the old arguments, the hurt feelings, the stubborn pride, they all seemed so small now, in the face of what could have been. We walked back inside together, Maribel following close behind. And I realized that sometimes it takes a moment of fear to remind us of what truly matters. As we sat down at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around mugs of tea, I looked at my daughter and felt a wave of gratitude for Maribel, for the police, and most of all, for this second chance to be a family again. The truth had unfolded in the most unexpected way, and as the night wore on, I knew that nothing would ever come between us again. After the chaos finally settled and the last of the police cars had disappeared down the street, Sloane and I found ourselves sitting in her kitchen, hands wrapped around steaming mugs of chamomile tea, the kind she used to hate as a teenager but now claimed helped her sleep. The house, which had been filled with tension and fear just an hour before, now felt oddly peaceful, as if the walls themselves were exhaling a sigh of relief. We sat in silence for a moment, letting the events of the night sink in, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away and leaving us both a little shaky, a little raw, but somehow lighter than we'd felt in ages. I looked at Sloane across the table, her hair still a little wild from running outside, her eyes red from crying but sparkling with something I hadn't seen in a long time, maybe hope. Maybe just the relief of being safe, or maybe the simple joy of having her mother by her side. We both started to laugh, the kind of laughter that bubbles up when you're so relieved you can't help yourself. And before long we were giggling like we used to when she was a little girl and we'd stay up late watching old movies together. "Can you believe it?" Sloane said, wiping tears of laughter from her cheeks. Our family drama turned into a real-life crime show. "I mean, if this doesn't get us on Dateline, I don't know what will," I snorted, nearly spilling my tea, and replied, "Well, at least I wore my good blouse. If I'm going to be on TV, I want to look presentable." We both dissolved into laughter again, the tension of the past year melting away with every chuckle. It felt so good to laugh with her, to share a moment that wasn't tinged with resentment or regret, but just pure, unfiltered relief. Sloane reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her grip warm and steady. "I'm so glad you listened to Maribel," she said softly, her voice trembling just a little. "And I'm glad you're here, Mom. I really am." I squeezed her hand back, feeling a lump rise in my throat. "I'm glad I'm here too, sweetheart. I missed you so much." For a long time we just sat there, holding hands, letting the silence speak for us. It was as if all the old grudges, all the things we'd left unsaid, were finally being washed away by the events of the night. We started to really talk for the first time in what felt like forever. We talked about everything and nothing, about the silly argument that had kept us apart for so long, about the things we'd both been too stubborn to admit, about the ways we'd hurt each other without meaning to. Sloane told me about her new job, her worries about the future, her hopes and dreams and fears. I told her about my own struggles, about how much I'd missed her, about how proud I was of the woman she'd become. We laughed about old memories like, The time she tried to cook Thanksgiving dinner by herself and nearly set the kitchen on fire. Or the time we got lost on a road trip and ended up at a llama farm instead of the beach. We cried a little too, but it was the good kind of crying, the kind that leaves you feeling lighter, freer, more connected than before. As the hours slipped by, the kitchen grew quieter, the tea grew cold, but neither of us wanted to move. It was as if we were both afraid that if we broke the spell, the distance between us would return. But it didn't. Instead, we found ourselves making plans for Sunday dinners. For movie nights, for family holidays that didn't end in arguments about turkey. We promised to call each other more, to listen more, to forgive more easily. It wasn't a grand dramatic reconciliation just to women, mother and daughter, finding their way back to each other one conversation at a time. Sometimes it takes a little fear and a lot of excitement to remind us what really matters. As I finally stood to leave, Sloane hugged me tight, whispering, "Don't wait another year to come back, okay?" I promised her I wouldn't, and for the first time in a long time, I knew I meant it. As I drove home that night, the city lights twinkling outside my window, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Life is unpredictable, messy, and sometimes downright scary. But it's also full of second chances and unexpected blessings. I've realized that no matter how much time passes, it's never too late to reach out, to forgive, to start over. And as I pulled into my driveway, I couldn't help but smile, knowing that Sloane and I had found our way back to each other, not in spite of the chaos, but because of it. Sometimes the scariest nights lead to the brightest mornings. And sometimes all it takes is a little courage and a lot of love to bring a family back together. So, what would you have done if someone whispered, "Don't go in," at your daughter's door? Would you have listened or barged right in? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more real-life tales, laughter, and a little bit of suspense, because life after 50 is anything but boring.